Hi there folks, this is Peter Sco for Music is a Journey, and today I want to just do a short video for me. What I want to do is to talk about a couple of albums that I kind of glossed over in my last video. I'm taking a look here at Deep Purple's Stormbringer and Come Taste the Band. A little bit of a story behind what the heck happened. I knew that I had a Deep Purple video to make this month, and I knew that I had one other band's video to make this month, and I wrote down the dates. I planned it all out, and then when it came time to start getting ready the week before, I mixed them up in my mind. And I listened to that other band's music all week long, and then I got ready to record the video, set everything up for it, and then realized, oh shoot, it's the wrong band. But since I was all ready to record that video, I did. And then, the next night, I hastily prepared to record the Deep Purple one. Now, what happened there then is that I talked about each of the Deep Purple albums. I had actually listened to the first three recently. I do listen to In Rock, Fireball, and sometimes Machine Head from time to time, as well as Burn. But Who Do We Think We Are? Come Taste the Band and Stormbringer, I actually don't listen to all that much. And here's another thing. In the 1980s, when I got into Deep Purple, all the albums I mentioned were available on cassette, except for Who Do We Think We Are, Stormbringer, and Come Taste the Band. So I actually never heard those albums until the 2000s when I got into Deep Purple again and picked up those albums. So it was fairly easy for me to talk about the other 7 albums in the video, even though I wasn't actually prepared for it. But the other 3, it was difficult for me to remember exactly what to say about what tracks. So, especially these last 2 here, albums 9 and 10, I just want to give my opinion about those because I have now listened to them 3 times. Yesterday morning, yesterday evening, this morning, and then again tonight. Almost all the way through. So, first of all, I want to talk about Stormbringer. A lot of people have mentioned, I noticed that they really love the artwork on here, and I don't know how many people are aware of it, but even though this is a drawn picture, it is based on a real photograph of a tornado, a black and white photograph. And Chris Prophy, I just watched his video ranking the songs of this album on my way home tonight on the train, and he mentioned the cover art. And so I decided to take a look on the internet, and actually on the Deep Purple fan site called Highway Star, there is actually an article about the original photograph. So you may want to check that out, or if I remember, I'll put a link to it in the description if I remember to do that. Right. So anyway, this is of course the second album with David Coverdale and Glenn Hughes. Now, Burn, I felt was a Deep Purple album. They brought in a new vocalist and a new bass player who could also sing, and it was a new approach for the band, but I felt the band was very excited to be working together, those 5 men, and it shows on the album. The music is very exciting. There's, contributions from everybody. Richie Blackmore's all over the place. Ian Pace is in there. John Lord is showing off, yeah, it just feels like a band album, a band that's excited about working together. This here actually feels like Deep Purple is starting to transform into something else. Now, you could say that as well from the Mark I to Mark II lineup. There was quite a transition going from that more British pop, psychedelic, late 60s hard rock, progressive rock sound, and going straight into a much more harder, heavy rock band, which then ironed out its heaviness a little bit. But no, this is really a transition becoming a different band, I feel. So, first of all, on this album, we've got the opening track, Stormbringer. That feels very much like a Deep Purple song, and in a similar vein to Burn, both lyrically and musically. But it also seems to hint at the direction that Richie Blackmore would go with Rainbow. And for me, in a way, it is the last of those kinds of Deep Purple songs until, who knows, like much later on down the line, maybe not until the 90s or 2000s, or probably early 90s at least. After Stormbringer, though, the next song is Love Don't Mean a Thing. And I think if you had never heard this album before, and you heard this song, you probably would not guess it's a Deep Purple song. It's not until the very end, when Ritchie Blackmore's guitar solo comes in, by his picking style, I feel, that indicates that it is Ritchie Blackmore. And it could very well just be like a Glenn Hughes, David Coverdale, project song with Ritchie Blackmore contributing a guitar solo in. And lyrically it's also strange too, because it's about wanting your money and gotta have your money, and before I say my prayers at night I count my money. It just seems like a weird, lyrically weird song for Deep Purple or David Coverdale to be singing. But I don't know, perhaps they're making a statement about somebody. I'm not sure about that. Then we go on to Holy Man, which is a Glenn Hughes sung, exclusively Glenn Hughes sung song, a slower one. And it is a lovely song, but it does sound like a Glenn Hughes solo song. Seriously, like, word on that coming up here in a moment. The next one after that, Hold On. Actually, I don't mind the song, but again, we've got 3 songs in a row here now that feel like it's a David Coverdale song, a David Coverdale Glenn Hughes project, Glenn Hughes solo, David Coverdale Glenn Hughes project. And it's almost like, what happened to Deep Purple? We started with Stormbringer, and after that, we're doing the Glenn Hughes David Coverdale project. I'm not sure where that's going. It's not until the rest of the album we start to feel a little bit more of the Deep Purple that we heard on Burn. A song like Lady Double Dealer feels a little bit more like a Deep Purple song, but at the same time it also feels like a Whitesnake song. And maybe in a way, it's not a surprise, because at one point David Coverdale, John Lord, and Ian Paice were all playing in Whitesnake on at least 2 albums, and John Lord was on for I think 4 or 5 albums altogether. So maybe it's not a surprise. Like, this band, Deep Purple, is slowly starting to head in the direction of Whitesnake. I feel Ritchie Blackmore's involvement on this is less. I don't feel he's making the same effort to make his guitar stand out like he used to on the previous albums. It seems to be more like he's taking a back seat and letting Glenn Hughes do more writing. Maybe. We hear a lot more of the funk, we hear a lot more of the bass coming in here. Yeah, Can't Do It Right. That is a very funky song, and it does sound like it's a Glenn Hughes song. But in one interview I remember Glenn Hughes saying Ritchie Blackmore wrote the guitar part for that, and he said Ritchie Blackmore is very funky, people. Something like that. What else do we have on here? Highball Shooter, again, it's a rock song feeling a little bit more like Deep Purple. Maybe one of the few songs that actually do make me feel like it's a Deep Purple song. The Gypsy, that actually has a pretty good riff to it. I like that kind of slower, heavier, not like really like metal heavy, but just slower, heavier riff that it has going on there. David Coverdale does a really wonderful job of singing it. And then we get on to Soldier of Fortune, which is really a pleasant thing. We actually have some acoustic guitar from Ritchie Blackmore, which we haven't heard since the Mark I period. So that is really nice to hear. But again, aside from the fact that Ritchie Blackmore is playing acoustic guitar, it's largely about a David Coverdale song, David Coverdale lyrics, David Coverdale's vocal ability. And so this, it's starting to stretch what Deep Purple was, like really starting to pull into another territory, I feel. And of course, Ritchie Blackmore was just not as enthused about being in the band at this time. We know he was already preparing new material for another project, and then of course, finally he went off to form Rainbow. So then we move on to this one, Come Taste the Band, and I think you can just forget about this being a Deep Purple album. I don't mean that it shouldn't be considered a Deep Purple album. I mean, when you listen to it, don't think about it as Deep Purple. Think about it as you've got a band with David Coverdale on vocals, Glenn Hughes dropping some really funky bass lines and some great soulful and funky vocals. You've got Tommy Bolin on guitar, nice crunchy rock guitar sound, and his Ecoflex and his slide guitar playing. And then, of course, you've got the Deep Purple guys, John Lord and Ian Paice coming in as well. This feels more like a supergroup of these guys, not a Deep Purple album. And I think, okay, so here's the thing that I was considering. You think about other bands from the 70s, pretty much everybody changed their sound over the course of the 70s, or, you know, even from the late 60s, if you will. I mean, Yes changed their sound deep. Black Sabbath changed their sound. Each album had some kind of new experimental things. I mean, we had Bill Ward singing lead vocals on a ballad, for heaven's sake. You know, Pink Floyd changed, Led Zeppelin changed, Aerosmith not so much. Nazareth, well, they changed their sound too, but the thing is that all of those other bands kept the same members. Throughout the 70s, those bands had the same basically four guys, I think in most cases. Deep Purple was the band that changed members. Okay, even Uriah Heep. Yes, they changed drummers and bass a lot, but you still had the main sound of the band. David Byron on vocals, Mick Box on guitar, Ken Hensley on vocals and keyboards. So yeah, it is the main sound with the vocalists and the lead instrumentalists, usually guitar and also keyboards, that really give us the sound of the band, the sound that is at the front. And, you know, they've replaced this from, alright, so Mark 1 to Mark 2, already they replaced the lead vocals, and then they established a new sound for themselves, and then they replaced, you know, lead vocals, they replaced one of the musicians who contributed to the songwriting, and brought in two new guys who could do their own songwriting, and Glenn Hughes composing his own music. The Deep Purple sound really changed, and by this album, it's not recognizable even as a Deep Purple album anymore, because there are just so many new faces that were not there during the classic sound. Now, I'm not saying that this shouldn't be considered a Deep Purple album, don't get me wrong. Actually, I think it's really kind of cool that they have this one album that's like that in their catalog. Similarly, like, you know, Shades of Deep Purple is also a unique album in their catalog. A lot of their albums are. In rock, they never made such a hard, raw album again, even though they had some heavier ones later on, like Abandon. But anyway, about this one here, it is a really good, solid rock, funky rock, hard rocking album. Pretty much every track is a rocker or funky rocker. Coming Home, of course, opening with that Ecoflex guitar thing that Tommy Bolin does so well. Lady Luck, a just good hard rock song. Getting Tighter, a Glenn Hughes one with that really funky bit in the middle, and Glenn Hughes doing that woo-hoo-hoo-hoo, whatever, you know, really high sound that he does so well. Dealer, another rocker. I Need Love, a rocker. Drifter, another rocker. Love Child, a slower, heavier one with a really cool riff. And it's not until this time round, Ode to G, the first half, we get really something different with piano and Glenn Hughes on lead vocals. And then it goes into an instrumental part with the band, you know? And then you keep on moving. It's just such a really cool song. It is one of my favorite songs of Deep Purple, actually, from the 1970s. Just got a really nice feel and mood to it. So really, this feels like I said, Burn was the new Deep Purple with David Coverdale and Glenn Hughes working together with the band. Stormbringer is Ritchie Blackmore starting to step away, Glenn Hughes and David Coverdale taking on more of the songwriting responsibilities, and it's starting to sound more like a Coverdale Hughes or Hughes Coverdale project, and then this one here just sounding like an entirely new band, really. So I didn't really get to say that in the last video because, you know, a little bit of a mix-up there, and I really wanted to make those kind of comments because I think it's an interesting thing to observe in 70s rock, what 70s rock bands were doing, and particularly how this band handled changing some of the lead people, you know, at the front of the stage there. Okay, that's all I have to say about that then. Alright, the next band's video will be coming up in a couple of days after this one, so stick around for that. Thanks everybody who has watched. Thank you for the people who left the comments in the last video. Appreciate it. And see you around in the next one then. Cheers.